Hello, everybody. How are you? Today, we are lucky to have Eric with us. Eric is going to talk about 5 kilo video distribution strategies, which will help all the agencies that are listening to this. Eric is a video focused digital creative, and he has been into this video creation field for last 10 years. And before that, also, and currently, also, he is working in news broadcasting things. And he has, as his content has been featured in Tribune Broadcasting Company, the Orphan Show, Verizon Wireless, and others. Currently, Eric is based out of UK now. Before that, he was in US, so I think he understands both the markets very well. And he is based out of UK currently. He is head of video content and social media for a company, Executive Grapevine, and they are a B2B publisher. And their focus is on HR mainly, and I think we will have a very interesting conversation because he has worked in different fields and mainly from news. So welcome, Eric. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
So how are things in UK?
Yeah, it's great. It's cold and rainy as we get closer to the holiday break. Just typical December day, windy, rainy, and cold. Yeah.
Great. So Eric, this is a usual question which I ask everybody. So what was the inclination to jump into marketing? As we were just discussing a few moments back. So you started off with history, and
Yeah.
what was the thing that kicked you to jump into marketing?
Yeah, I just I got a degree, bachelor's degree of history in 2004, 2005, and I just didn't really know where I would go with that. And I had always been interested in the concept of video editing, and so I just kind of realigned my skills and went back to college and learned how to produce video, and then just really got an interest in telling people stories. And then once I learned to tell people stories, through editing theories and just good old fashioned storytelling, I took those talents and were able to kind of push them into new career paths, right? So that would be working within the news industry, publishing industry, and then getting into some agency work, but basically creating video content that tells a story. And if it's to tell a story to inform an audience or to ultimately sell them a product or get them interested in a service, it's all kind of the same concepts, right? So that's that's my very short journey into history major to where I am now. Yeah.
Great. So when we see video in a lot of context, we have seen in last 4 5 years, video thing has just boomed a lot. And due to the increase in bandwidth can be one reason. Other is with a lot of cameras getting very good. So the high-end phones which are having currently a lot of small mid-level phones also have 4K recording in that. And so that is one reason of increasing video. But what is the major difference that you see? Because now everybody is creating videos. So with your experience, because you have been in this for
Right.
a decade, more than decade. So what has been your experience that if you see some kind of video production, which was there in maybe 2010 or 2012, and a comparison with the current size and the current briefs maybe that you get?
Yeah. It's such an interesting question that you asked. Like what have I seen the evolution and what the video content is in the last 10 years? Because we're just so accustomed to it now, right? Like you think about how much we consume video content on our day to day. And what's amazing, it's in all sorts of different forms now, so in 2010, 28, I mean, Facebook didn't even have a video player yet. So you were consuming all your video content either through YouTube or through maybe your wireless service provider. A lot of times they had their own built-in networks, but you're watching it through YouTube and you were watching it right through the website as well, on mobile browsers. And so the experience of watching video has changed so much in the last, I'll say, like for this, I'll start 2008 because that's really kind of when I got focused doing this. From 2008 to 2020, that's 12 years now. Okay, so it's been a huge jump. So you brought up things like, shooting, cameras are more affordable. True. I think it's just easier to become a video producer or produce video content. And you've definitely seen, I would say in the early 2010, so like 2012 to 2016 maybe,
Yeah.
people were concerned about like the type of cameras we were using and how the shot was, and, you know,
Yeah.
bringing these very cinematic visions just to your mobile screen. And I still think there is a lot of that, but what you see so much now is more of UGC, user generated content,
True.
where it's less about how the image looks and more so what the tone of the whole thing is, right? So if you look at something like TikTok, right?
Yeah.
These are people selfie, poor lighting. It's not so much about the gear or the depth of focus, you know? So I think
Yeah.
we've gone from being initially wowed that we can watch video every day on our mobile devices or on our computers to then really being focused on like the image quality. And now we're focused more so on the story rather than what it looks like, at least in my opinion. Now, sure, I still do for every, you know, TikTok video, TikTok wormhole I get into, or any, you know, Instagram story is another great
Yeah.
way of consuming video content. I'll still watch a really nice cinematic piece. So like right before, when I was getting ready to speak with you, I was watching this video on Scotland, canoeing these really remote lochs way up in the northwest of the country. And it was just two guys in a canoe, but they had drone footage and an amazing, you know, camera to shoot with and fantastic audio. So I still get sucked into that type of storytelling as well. I guess, you know, the one thing that is more important than ever now is just the story of the video, and what is the story that you're telling. And that could be if it's a news documentary, or if it's, you know, selling your agency as a service or representing your client. What story are you telling?
Okay.
People want story, and they can, if they don't find the story, they'll leave your video, right? So that's kind of the short /
Crux
long
of the,
explanation.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when we see in the initial days, I think 2004, 2005, YouTube was the only thing. So there were a lot of platforms, but after that,
Right.
YouTube came up, and then it became the only platform where people used to go for video content. Slowly, with Facebook coming into picture, Twitter also increased their the size from 1 minute to a lot longer then, and slowly all the platforms came up, and then they had content. So coming directly to the topic, what are the strategies that you would like for people to understand in the distribution part? One is have a good story, and how would you
Yeah.
extend that with so many places of distribution? And so somebody who is starting today, what should be his focus for while creating a video content?
Right. So, and I'm just writing this down here. I think I'll start off with the whole concept of a good video distribution strategy. And, you know, a lot of my background comes from the news and information world. But I do think these concepts definitely go into brand marketing, certainly content marketing. Is remember that the way you distribute the video and how you message the video is just as important as how you create the video. So that would be my first, you know, big trend or thing to think of is think about how you are going to distribute and engage the video while you're making the video. I think that's really important because it's really a part of it's a part of the ecosystem of the video process, right? And certainly now, and I always tell a lot of the news organizations that I speak to about this, think about now these times that we're living in amongst a worldwide pandemic, right?
Yes.
If you're sending someone out to shoot footage, right, they're really taking a big risk in telling that story, right? And even it's even the same that I've been seeing lately. There's been a lot more television productions, you know, debut with social distancing measures in places, but basically, like, you need to reward their risk of going out into the field and shooting news content or any sort of marketing content. So make sure that you know what you're going to do with their video to validate their risk going forward out there to shoot, right? So I think that's a really important part. And then the other ones, it's like, these are all very, you know, you asked for the top 5. I don't know, but these are like the 5 that I go by, and it's all in random order. So I would say the next thing to do is really understand how your audience consumes your video content. And it's really important to understand that for every single platform that you invest time in, because every single different platform, the way people consume and engage with video content is different. right?
True.
If you look at, we can start off with the big one with Facebook, right? Your video content is going to come up on a infinite scroll, right? You only have maybe 3 seconds to really engage that audience. So what are you doing in those first 3 seconds to make sure that people are getting in there, right? YouTube's a little bit different. A lot of times on YouTube, especially, news and editorial, is people are seeking out your story, or they find your story based off other things that they've been watching. So at that, on YouTube, you have a little bit more patience, right? You can kind of craft your edit a little bit, kind of warm it into the story. So really know how how your audience is engaging and consuming your video on all the platforms, right? My main focus is still, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and website O&O. I don't know a lot about the TikTok platform. I certainly think it's valid, but I think that is really the current disruptor in the way people consume video content now, right? It's in really short bursts.
Yeah.
So right.
Sorry for.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
Yeah. So I had a question which was extending in the first thing that you said. Always have in mind what you are shooting for in the first place.
Yeah.
So what is your take on a lot of movies nowadays are releasing directly on OTT platforms, which maybe there are a lot of movies which are directly releasing on Netflix or maybe HBO or Hulu or other platforms which are there. And sometimes the experience of people is not the same, because the movie was created in a way that it would have been seen on a large screen. And when the same experience is there on the OTT platform, people see there is not so much engagement in that way, or the stickiness of the product is not there as a film,
right?
In a way,
right?
So is there a correlation of what you are saying in the same thing, that a thing was created for theaters and then it is directly released on the OTT platform, and that is where the communication gap or maybe the experience gap is coming?
I think when you're watching, say, a film on a device, not in the theater, I think I've never really actually thought about that, because really, that's a interesting concept. I think it just kind of goes back to people are used to consuming different types of video on, say, their mobile device rather than watching a film. So I don't really know if that makes much sense.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I think we can go ahead with the
sure
5 trips.
All right. So so the first one was, remember to think about the whole process, like understand that distribution is part of the whole video life cycle. The next one was understand how your audience consumes your video. The next one I would say is thumbnail and description, right? Certainly on YouTube, the thumbnail and the description is part of the formula to get your videos in your video and your video content into new audiences. So really choose an engaging thumbnail. Brands really, I think, have this process down. There's lots of different ways you can source the proper thumbnail. You want to make sure it's engaging, but what's great about the thumbnail and then writing an appropriate description to go along with it is that you always have the ability to A/B and to A/B test, right? So see which combination is working, and from there, target audience growth around that. So thumbnail and description is another huge thing, especially in the news world. The description is kind of what sets your whole package apart, and a lot of description has a great result within SEO as well. So, especially on YouTube, if I think it's the first 2 paragraphs will have a direct result in SEO. Same thing with the title, right? You want to make sure that your title is easy to pronounce, easy to type. There's a lot of, a lot of product names that are kind of easily misspelled, but when it comes to titling your video content, that is what's going to come up in search. So you want to make sure that, you have a title that is memorable, short enough and that people will search. So I'll add those in. Let's see. Another good thing is really utilize the platform tools. So that is what Facebook and Instagram and YouTube have built in for you to extend the life of your video. A lot of times, you know, we do it a lot when we're placing ads, but in telling narrative content, right? People tend to forget to add the labels within Facebook, right? Add the tags in YouTube. So use the platform tools. If you are a organization or agency that has a lot of content, one of the best things that you can do is divide your channels up into playlists. So that's an easy way for people that once they find you to kind of have a good idea of the type of content that you create, the variety of it, but also it's not just one giant landing page of all sorts of different video content. So use the platform tools in your distribution strategy. And the last thing that I'll say is it's a little bit controversial, but don't rely on virality, okay?
Yeah.
You don't, a viral video doesn't necessarily mean a hit or your brand is a household name. If you do have a piece of content that does gain a lot of views or becomes product of conversation, make sure that audience knows how to find you the next time. Does that make sense? You don't just want to like have that flash in the pan once and then just kind of go back into obscurity. So I think you need to, I've had this conversation a lot, especially when I worked in newsrooms in the United States, where I would speak to stakeholders and like, well, we want to go viral. We want something to go viral.
Yeah.
And that's not really how it works anymore. Nothing that goes viral generally ends well, in my opinion, right? So focus on creating good content. And if you have that piece blow up, think about how you're going to retain that audience once they've initially seen it. So that's pretty much it. What do you think?
Yeah. So I have a lot of questions now.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So once we see YouTube was there, YouTube has a different algorithm. Facebook has its own Facebook Watch, which they are trying to promote and then push. They have created a single button in their app also now for the same. And Instagram tried with IGTV. It didn't work out. So now they are again pushing the reels and the stories part that is there. So when we see these all platforms working simultaneously and strategies are different. So if you want to get views on YouTube, it is not something which will happen overnight. It is a process. So regular customers are regular viewers are not going to be there. So I think average lifetime on YouTube is very high. But when you see it on Facebook and Watch, again, it will be not so high as YouTube. So how do you see the urgency? Suppose you are in the newsroom. So how do you define that this video is a must for Facebook because the trend will die in 6-7 hours, or maybe this is a hot topic that we need to upload it first on the YouTube, or maybe first on Instagram, or maybe Facebook. So how do you judge those things?
So I think the best way to judge it is really knowing where the bulk of your audience comes from at one given time.
Okay.
I certainly think in the news world, in the news industry, but also certainly in the marketing industry or advertising, it's always going to tend to be more Instagram or Facebook, right? Or probably both. But that all you know all that when you understand how your audience is interacting with your videos, right? So in the case of say it was like breaking news, my first place that I'd want to get the video content out would be onto our social media channels. So that would be Instagram, that would be Facebook, that would be Twitter. Excuse me. And then after that, focus on how to get the longer story form to YouTube, right? So it's all, you have to look at is what do I have in front of me? And then truly knowing, especially if it's in that 6 to 7 hour news cycle, right? On social media, your audience will probably had already interacted with you that day, right? So they're gonna, you know, your content will show up more in their feed because they interacted with you earlier in the day. So that's another thing to keep in mind. It's really just knowing what story you have to tell and when and how the people will watch it and engage with it the easiest, you know, with the most ease.
Yeah.
So
So another concept that the marketers always push people or the agencies to do is news jacking,
Uh-huh.
which is there where some kind of maybe a football match is going on, and then
Right.
use those hashtag to gain views or maybe do some
Mm-hmm.
commentary around it or have some
Yeah.
opinion around it. In the same
Right.
ways, suppose US elections were going on, a lot of
Right.
companies try to get more eyeballs due to the same thing and do those things. So is that a recommended thing, or some brands should not do those things, or what is your take on those things?
I think it's something that if it's going to be done, really needs to be heavily scrutinized before and think of all of the negative outcomes that could happen. Plan for
Okay.
that. There's certain things that some brands shouldn't interact with, right?
Okay.
There's certain things that it just, yeah, I would say if it relates to your brand, go ahead and try it. But you just have to be authentic and you have to be genuine. And thanks to social media, people will let you know pretty quick if you're being disingenuous. I mean, you can see there's tons of case studies. Pepsi and Kylie Jenner is a really strong example where during time of civil unrest,
Yeah.
Pepsi released a commercial with her handing a can of Pepsi to a police officer or protesters. Like, that's not what we need right now. That's making your brand seem thirsty and you're
Right.
profiteering off someone else's struggle. So certainly don't do that. Again, a great question. Interesting concept. Do it if it fits, but don't, like, if you have to think about it for more than, say, a certain amount, like half an hour, then it's not going to work. It needs to be an easy fit. And then,
Understood.
also make sure to just think about every possible negative outcome that could happen with it.
Got it. Uh, Next thing is,
Yeah.
there is a lot of consumption of time when we see
Mm-hmm.
we are creating videos. So I
Right.
think a polished YouTube video will take a lot longer than a polished TikTok video or maybe a small Instagram reel.
Right.
And when we try to, so a lot of people in the agency world always say things like, this content is going to last for this long, so
Mm-hmm.
let us create it in this much time. So suppose for
Right.
TikTok, it is a lot of raw form of content. Instagram reels or Instagram stories, the videos which are there are in a lot of raw format. So how would you take that up, or what would be the focus that you will let people know in the distribution segment? So it is
Right.
time versus the effort, or efforts versus the outcome kind of.
Yeah. Okay. Again, I think that comes down to knowing what your main goal is with the campaign, right? Is your main goal to sell a product, introduce something, launch something,
Okay.
versus if it's more of a long-term goal, right? I think all of these things all happen at the same time. So I think when we're developing a brand strategy for content in my previous roles, we would sit down for the video side. We would have the main YouTube version. Okay, so we would have the main YouTube version, we called it. That would land on our websites. That would land on our Amazon pages, right? That would
Okay.
land in YouTube for when we would, for our own ad placement. Then from there, we would pare it down to each single platform, right? And then if we could retell that story using the native platforms, like you mentioned, like just doing it within Instagram or
Yeah.
within TikTok, we would attempt it. But we would always re-edit a different piece of content for that specific platform. So again, with the resources devoted to it, that needs to, how you are going to push the video out, and all the different ways you're going to push that video out need to be talked about before you start shooting. Because it just, the last thing you want to do is waste anyone's time, waste any resources to book studio, hire talent, rent equipment, unless you really
No.
want, right, know where it's going. I have worked at companies that I started where I would find hard drives of footage of amazing travel footage and shoots in rented airplanes, and it never went outside. They never figured out a way to
To
properly tell
distribute.
that story, right? So they spent all of that money for one ad, for one 30-second run, right? So you really need to think about where you're going to put it as you're making it.
Okay. One more thing is,
Yeah.
usually on that part, a lot of travel bloggers always say, and a lot of people who create content or are
Mm-hmm.
shooting, they always say that in early days it was the rolls or reels which were coming. So then it
Right.
was a limited thing. But now we have hard disks, we have the cards which are 128 GB, 68 GB,
Mm-hmm.
64 GB, and those kind of things. So whenever they are shooting, people say shoot as much as you can. Whenever we will go on editing table, we will see what are the footages that we have to get. So
Right.
do you feel that due to this the authenticity is decreasing, people are just trying to shoot everything and then get the best out of it? Or in the initial days when there was screenplay was written or something of those sort were
Mm-hmm.
done, that these are the 15 shots that we need, or these are the 15 angles that we need shots from? So what kind of change do you see in that kind of behavior? Is that happening
Uh,
or is it not?
uh, right. So, what was the line you said? Is authenticity decreasing? Is that what you
Yes,
said? Right.
yes,
So
yes.
I love that because it very well could be, but I've never done it in my own work.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So like everything that I do, I come with, and it could be if I'm like creating video content to tell a story
Yeah.
or to sell a product, I come with it with a very uh, honest and authentic approach to it. And I
Understood.
do think that you do see people creating video content because it's the trend, right? And there's nothing wrong with following a trend,
Yeah.
but you need to have context to why you're creating the content this way. If you're creating this content this way because you feel you can tell your story in a way that your audience is certainly digesting it and consuming it, then do that. But if you're creating this content because that's what everyone else is doing, but you're just doing it to do it, I think people can ID authenticity a lot easier now
Yeah.
than they could say, like, 6 to 10 years ago. So I would say, everything that you do, again, and this is a very esoteric approach to it, but be authentic about it, right? Be true to the brand, your brand, or the story and the people stories that you're telling.
Great, great. Eric, as we are moving towards the end, we usually
Yeah.
do these two questions with everybody.
Okay.
One is, what is your motivation to learn new things, as we are in this field which is ever changing?
Yeah.
And so, how do you keep up with the new upcoming things? Maybe the video trends which are there, or the editing things which are there. So, what is your source of knowledge? How do you grasp that knowledge?
So, what is my source? Got it. I was just jotting these down so I remember them as we go along. Yeah. My motivation is something I've really, it kind of hit me a couple years ago, is just constant learning
Yeah.
and constant growth. And so, for example, I just took a certificate program in UX design because I'm
Okay.
fascinated with the way users interact with products. And I feel that I took a lot of my UX learnings and practices, and now I can add that into the video world, which I
True.
think is I think it's pretty smart. I am certain like other people have done it, but it's just you can take a lot of those concepts in UX and apply them in almost every single industry, right? Where you just think of your audience as your user, and
Yeah.
that's the step, right? So, but I've always pushed myself to learn. So if it's an editing trick, like for every video edit I do, every video project I take on, there's probably 3 to 4 YouTube video tutorials within that video that I watched and got inspiration from and learned to do on my own. So you just, like, in this industry where the technology moves so fast, for us to stay current, we have to keep upskilling and reskilling ourselves.
True.
Otherwise, our jobs might not exist as quick as the technology moves. And I think about every single job title and job role that I've had since I started this in 2000, in the late 2000s, right? 2008 ish, was the progression of my titles have changed, but my job has always still really kind of stayed the same.
Yeah.
But that is, at the end of it, is just telling really good stories. So always keep learning. Like and I think in terms of sources for it, ways to find learnings, So with my job now is I create video content, but I also lead the social media strategy. So
True.
my sources for learning in the social media world is relying on groups through Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter threads. Marketing Twitter is one. Reading case studies, reading use cases, case studies from big platforms, from other large agencies. And then in terms of like learning like actual things, like in terms of video editing, YouTube, you can find anything you want on YouTube. And, I think in the type of work that we do, we intake, right? We consume so much content that we know what is real and what is not. And we can form our own opinion from multiple sources than, rather just one. So, but yeah, I think that's really important. Always keep learning a new skill, learning a new trick. It's just, we just have to, you just have to.
True. Eric, I had a great time, and I
Yeah,
think
thank
people
you.
would have a lot of knowledge from this session. Thanks a lot for spending time with us. Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. Take care.